Hello everyone. Now today we are going to talk a bit about step level errors in PowerQuery. The pop-up window that you get to see on the screen is a pretty common one, and most of us faced it at some point, which is informing us that we have step level errors, which were identified while the data refresh was working. Now, let's look at how we can find a sustainable way to identify those errors without affecting the data refresh. Now, on this pop-up, I could go and click on the view errors, and that will generate a new query that's going to only contain the rows containing at least one of the errors. I could scroll and then be able to find what is the actual column they generated. I can see it's the client satisfaction. I can click somewhere inside of the cell and I will be able to see the error message. But the next time I would refresh, the same error message would pop up. So we are going to now delete this one. We don't need it. Plus, even if I would keep it during the next refresh, that would be an additional query that would get refreshed as well. So we are going to look at how we can make this process a sustainable one. In this specific case, we are going to go to our complaints data, where we do have all the steps that we want to perform during the ETL process. But in order for this to work, we are going to introduce a staging concept, because we are going to perform in this specific table all the necessary steps we want, and then we would break it down in two separate tables. One of the tables would contain the clean data without errors. The other table would contain just the records that contained errors, and we are going to have clear indication on what column the error came up and what is the actual error message plus the details around it. In order for us to do this, you can see that I have for now two different categories. I have the base file and I have the data model. We are going to just create a new group. So we created a new group called staging step, sorry. I'm going to move the table. I'm going to drag and drop it into the new category, and then we can move data model to the top. Using the folders is a nice way to organize them. Now, first step we are going to do is we are going to deactivate the load on this table. It's going to prompt us saying that if data was used in any kind of visual in Power BI, it's going to break, because now we are only going to use this table during the ETL process, meaning while data gets loaded into the data model, not afterwards. It's not going to be visible. This is fine. And we'll also rename it. Now, if I would like to add different steps, I could do that. And I would do it here at the staging step. Next up is, as we are mentioning, we are going to have two different tables. This means that I'm going to reference this table twice. This was number 1, this was number 2. And we are going to shift them up in the data model. This is going to be our complaints data, so we can rename it. And this is going to be complaints data errors. So those are the two tables we are going to work with. On the first one, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We said we want clean data. We are going to go now into the remove rows menu, and we are going to remove the errors. Now, if I look at the formula bar, I know that my errors are not going to be removed right now. The error was coming on a totally different column. While when I added the step that removes the errors, he referenced the column I was currently selected. That's why we have the ID column referenced, and it would only look for errors in that respective column. We don't want that. We would like to remove the errors on all columns. Hence, we are going to remove the additional parameter. So everything that goes from the comma, including the ID reference hard coding, we are going to remove. We are just going to reference the previous step because the previous step is an actual table. Now we are sure that no errors get loaded anymore. And we move on to the second table. Now the second table is a table where we are going to do most of the magic to identify the errors. First, I need to identify a column that's going to provide me a unique identifier for the team that's providing me the data. If I need to go back to tell them you have this kind of following errors, they need to be able to backtrack what is the actual record they need to look at. In our case, that's the ID column. So that's a column we are going to keep. All the other columns we can consider as being potential to failure. So we have the potential of having errors. So in order for us to do this, we are going to right click on the column and we are going to go to the option of unpivot other columns. Now, that is the first step. Next, we need to identify errors. And the easiest way to identify errors is to the try function. So we are just going to add a new column, custom column. And we know that our errors are going to come up on the value column. So try function, we're going to have the value. Let's also rename it. And as you can see, this creates a record. Now, once we add the try function, we can go ahead and expand it. I'm going to see here 2 values. I'm actually interested in 3 values. So in case this happens, we are going to initially expand it with those 2 attributes. And then we are going to add an additional one. So the additional one we are going to add is the attribute called error. That's going to be the actual indicator of what the error message details are. Okay? In most of the cases, it's going to come up null, because if we don't have an error, we get to see the value. In case we have an error, we are not going to have a value, but we are going to have a record on the error column. Now that we did this, we can just go ahead and filter. I'm going to say load more. I'm only interested in the ones marked as true, because it means those are fields with errors. I also have the indication on the value column that I have the error. Now I can expand the error column, and I will want reason, message, and details. Those are the 3 components of a PowerQuery error message. I can expand it further, exactly like we did. So now we have the details. And as a last step, what I can do to clean up the report is the value, the has error, and the value 1 column are now no longer required, so I can simply remove them. And of course, after setting the data types, I can load this one. I know I'm not going to face errors anymore. And I can leverage this one to inform the team that's working on supplying the data to actually fix it. So I have the ID, which was the unique indicator we looked at. Then I have the attribute, which is representing the column on which the error came up. And then I have the details of the error. So I see that it's a date format error. And then I have the message. And then I would also have details in case this would be available. In our case, the message clearly indicates us that PowerQuery found the hashtag NA value, mainly coming from one the Excel formula that went wrong. And we know that it's really not a fan of hashtag error values coming from Excel. So that's something that would need to get fixed. But Once we are going to load it, let's also set the data types first. We anyhow know that all of them are going to be a text type. Go ahead, close and apply. And no more errors. Errors which, however, now we are going to have under control.